All right, hat off to PragerU for that. I like that intro. It was like solid. It was intense. You could feel my feelings there. Can you like feel it? I don't know. Anyway, this show is all about critiquing online critique. Whether you're progressive or you're QAnon, Trumper or whatever you are, libertarian. There are people who are online talking about the topics that you care about. They're like in your echo chamber. And let's be honest, some of them, actually all of them, bullshit a little bit. They all bullshit a little bit. We are going to critique them. It's all about critique. And there are 4 different areas that we look at. First, accuracy. Are they properly referencing the literature? Are they making up the other side's points? Anytime somebody's like, what they actually meant is XYZ. If somebody's going to be critiquing another person, they have to summarize the other person's points better than they can, or else it's just not accurate. Like, you can't set up a straw man. That's a straw man argument. You're setting up somebody that you can easily knock down. It's a fake person, so it doesn't count. You lose. Other uniqueness. So are they creative? Is it in a form of a poem or a TikTok video? Do they bring interesting information that we haven't heard yet? Like a new study that just came out. We don't want to all watch the same thing that's been said and rehash. That's boring. The third thing is power. Like, is it really like powerful? Does it move you with eloquence in a way that you cry until the sun comes up? Or is it really effing funny? You get extra points if you're funny, or you can really bring some power, especially if you punch above your weight. There's so many people out there giving online critique who don't have a forum, don't have an audience, and it's important that we recognize them. And finally, fourth, empathy. Empathy. You can do all these things and be still like mean. And that's okay. You can do you, but you're not going to convince the other side or a larger audience of anything. The best critique has a little bit of humility in it. It punches through those echo chambers and gets everybody saying, yeah, that what that other person said is bullshit. Like, they shouldn't do that. You're absolutely right. I'm flipping sides. I'm a flip sides. That's how empathy works. So the first one we're going to get to doing today is I saw this thing, PragerU. I've heard of them. I saw they did something on critical race theory. I know it's a controversial topic, so I'm sure there's going to be some assumptions thrown around, some inaccuracies. I don't know, but we'll see. Let me give them a shot, and let's get to watching this thing. I got my little booch. Glug, 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 glug. Look at that boochie. Ooh, look at that boochie. Homemade kettle chips. You can hear that sauce. That's a Mediterranean seasoning I put on that thing, okay? Sit back and enjoy this show. Because you gotta enjoy the show. You're gonna learn something, who knows? I'm gonna learn something. I don't know anything about this thing, so. Alright, so. Let's get it on.
Have you heard about critical race theory? I'm guessing you probably have. It has already insinuated itself into many institutions and is making rapid progress into others. If it takes hold, it will completely change the very nature of America and the way you live.
Okay, that's quite a statement. They're saying that this theory, if it is taught in many like schools, I guess, is going to change America, and they're using it like turn it upside down, like the flag's upside down. So they're like taking a little dig. That's cute. Listen, it better live up to the hype in some of this way if they're going to make that kind of claim.
Critical race theory holds that the most important thing about you is your race. The color of your skin, that's who you are. Not your behavior, not your values, not your environment. Your race. In critical race theory, if you are a member of a minoritized racial group, their term, not mine, you are a victim of a system that is rigged against you, a system that doesn't want you to succeed. On the other hand, if your race is privileged, you're an exploiter, whether you intend to be or not. Critical race theory begins from the assumption that racism occurs in all interactions. To see how this works, consider this thought experiment. Imagine you own a shop and two customers enter at the same time, one white and one black. Who do you help first? If you help the black person first, critical race theory would say you did so because you don't trust black people to be left alone in your store. That's racist. If you help the white person first instead, critical race theory would say you did so because you think blacks are second-class citizens. That's racist too. That's critical race theory.
So first, it's always about trying to interpret what the person's saying to the best of your ability, because you don't want this person, if I'm critiquing his critique, you don't want him to say, "Nah, that's not what I was saying." So in this case, it seems like he's saying that like no matter what you do, if you're the store owner, you as an individual can have some ill intent against black people. Like, I think with this, we gotta Google critical race theory about Wikipedia. Let's just critical race theory Wikipedia. I like Wikipedia because, again, edited by multiple sides. It may not be the best source of information for everything, but it's a good centerpiece. That's why Google features it for most of the definitions that we find. But anyway, let's just jump right into critical race theory. And I like to jump right down to the definitions part, because this top section will be edited so many times it might change, but definitions usually don't change. So definitions. Royal Brooks defined critical race theory in 1994 as a collection of critical stances against the existing legal order from a race-based point of view. Richard Delgado, a co-founder of the theory, defined in 2017 as a collection of activists and scholars interested in studying and transforming the relationship among race, racism, and power. Okay, so this definition, I would break it down to two parts. First, they're defining critical race theory as a framework to look at existing law and policy and see how it affects racial inequality. So it's law and policy, not like the intent of a store owner. And so in that way, this PragerU is very inaccurate in terms of their definition. However, I would have to concede the second part of this definition kind of defines critical race theory as a movement. And within each movement, you might have actors or activists taking the framework, applying it to different things, applying it to sociology, trying to understand why somebody's taking the actions that they're taking. Anecdotally, I've heard several of my friends define it in this direction, so I kind of get where they're coming from. I wish PragerU left a source for where they got their information from. But we'll look at it at the end. I'll research, because I'm really curious how critical race theory is being applied in these different areas. Because I can understand, the concern that maybe some conservatives might have if we're pushing forward this critical race theory in the movement, applying it to different things, but there's no accountability. But we'll get to that later.
It can find racism in anything, even if it has to read your mind to do it. Critical race theory is a uniquely American invention. Brewed up at Harvard Law School in the 70s, now part of the academic and media mainstream, it is also uniquely un-American because it rejects the core tenets of the American, classically liberal Judeo-Christian value system. It turns the bedrock American idea upside down. Here it is in the words of Richard Delgado and Jean Stefanczyk, two leading proponents. Critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and the neutral principles of constitutional law. It does this because critical race theory proponents assume racism is present everywhere and always, and they look for it critically until they find it. And they always find it.
Well,
it has to be there because that's...
So he's saying that critical race theory basically assumes that racism is always and ever present, that critical race theory sees all Americans as intentional evildoers rather than part of a system that is just maintaining a status quo. If you just maintain the status quo, well, the status quo is inequality between races. Therefore, if you're a black person and you do nothing to change that inequality, like maybe you help yourself. That's great. You're helping a black person. I'm helping myself. That's a point for anti-racist. But if I'm around all white people and not uplifting other black people, maybe I'm more racist than I am anti-racist because I'm not changing the status quo much other than helping myself. That's what I think the what the theory is. So I think right now it seems like a bad summary. So I gotta dock him for accuracy.
That's how the imperial European powers and then America set things up. Here, as in all dangerous academic theories, there is a kernel of truth. Human beings were not preoccupied with race until the 16th century, when Europeans began to explore and then colonize other parts of the world. Drawing distinctions between the races reached its peak in the 19th century with the widespread use of slave labor in North and South America. No one denies this. But since then, the Western world, and most especially America, has
Gotta give him points for him finding the truth in the theory, something that they agreed with.
spent a lot of time, money, and blood breaking free of its racist past. It's been a rocky road for sure, but great progress has been made. Critical race theory says all this progress is a mirage. Racism never died, never even faded a little bit. It just hid itself better. Critical race theory, therefore, is not a continuation of the civil rights movement. It is, in fact, a repudiation of it.
So you're saying that critical race theorists don't believe they are building off the grounds of the civil rights movement? Okay, let's look at the Wikipedia common themes. Common themes that are characteristic of work in critical race theory, as documented by such scholars as Richard Delgado and Jean Stefanik, include critique of liberalism. Critical race theory scholars question foundational liberal concepts such as Enlightenment, rationalism, legal equality, and constitutional neutrality, and challenge the incrementalist, step-by-step approach of the traditional civil rights discourse. Okay, they don't think things can be achieved step by step. Kind of saying Martin Luther King is naive, thinking that he can play within the system. Derek Bell, one of CTR's founders, argues that the civil rights advances for black people coincided with the self-interest of white elites. Yeah, okay. Likewise, Mary L. Dusdak performed extensive archival research in the U.S. Department of State and Department of Justice, including the correspondence by U.S. Ambassador abroad, and concluded that U.S. civil rights legislation was not passed because people of color were discriminated against. Rather, it was enacted in order to improve the image of the United States in the eyes of third world countries that the U.S. needed as allies during the Cold War. It's not like one thing. It's not one or the other. Of course, they advanced they did this to make their allies look good. Of course they did. But of course, like they wanted to help black people, just like emancipation of slavery. Yes, it crippled the South a little bit, and yes, it helped black people. Plenty of blacks in the North get excited, go fight the war. All these things. Two things can happen at the same time. There could be two truths, and so all right, hat off to PragerU for that.
To critical race theorists, Martin Luther King was both wrong and naive. White Americans can never judge blacks by the content of their character. They can only judge them, always unfavorably, consciously or unconsciously, by the color of their skin. Ironically, not since the Aryan obsession in Germany in the 19th.
Okay, I can see that part where critical race theorists are saying if you're white, subconsciously or not, you're going to make decisions that help white people and hurt black people, whether you admit it or not.
1930s and 1940s, where South African apartheid in the second half of the 20th century has the social movement been so obsessed with race. Critical race theory is then, in a very real sense, a counter-American revolution. But that's a positive, not a negative to those who subscribe to the theory. The American experiment was given a 400-year tryout, and it doesn't work. So let's scrap it. That's what they believe. Is that what you believe? I'm going to guess that most of you don't. So how do we stop critical race theory before it infects the brains of too many decent Americans, especially young people, and turns us into something we have never been and shouldn't ever want to be? The answer is simple. Refuse to accept it. Don't be intimidated by the heads I win, tails you lose logic of this self-destructive, America-hating, anti-reality idea. Don't be bullied into thinking that you're racist when you know you're not, or that you're a victim when you know you're not. Defend yourself while you still can. I'm James Lindsay, founder of New Discourses for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible.
It's just just the name Prager, like, are you Prager? It's just weird. Okay, so before I get into the review itself, I want to summarize what I feel their argument is. I want to get inside their head, just breathe with them, and so that I can really understand them and give a critique that's actually gonna like land. That's my goal here. And here's how I would summarize their argument, and then we'll get to the review. Number one, CRT endorses the idea of starting over. MLK is a chump. Civil rights movement didn't mean nothing. We were never going to get anywhere with that kind of effort. We need to burn this thing down. Okay. Number two, CRT teaches white equals bad. And number three, all this, the starting over, the white equals bad, is being taught to kids. Now with that, I'll say what I agree with, and then we'll go with accuracy, uniqueness, empathy, and power and empathy to critique the whole thing. But we'll get to the interesting part. But first of all, strike out all these things about CRT endorses, CRT teaches, and all this, which is CRT. Strike all that and replace it with movement. I think their whole argument starts to become more accurate, right? So the CRT movement endorses the idea of starting over. And I agree with this statement, and here's why I agree with it. You have the most prominent figures inside the movement are saying it needs overhaul. It needs to be ripped out, started over. And so if that is not the idea that most people in the movement share, we need someone prominent inside the movement to say that. And if we want to change that, somebody inside the movement's got to step up and say, nah, son. Number two, CRT teaches white equals bad. I'm going to actually group 2 and 3 together. CRT, again, movement teaches white equals bad. All of this, the starting over and white equals bad, is being taught to kids. Like all my friends have said, nah, man, CRT is not being taught to kids. And I was like, okay, CRT is not being taught to kids. And I Googled that. And yes, the crystallized framework is not being taught to kids. It might even be good if it was, compared to what is being taught to kids, because it's this. White equals bad, starting over. Just Google CRT public schools, and you'll find various articles with very specific details, not like a general, like they're lying, very specific details. I'll read you one I found. 30 public school districts in 15 states are teaching a book, Not My Idea, that tells readers that whiteness leads people to make deals with the devil for stolen land, stolen riches, and special favors. What in the that? I mean, look at this. It's like a contract with the devil. That's being taught to kids, little kids. It is important, and let's separate two things. It is important that we teach kids from power to work within and outside of the system to make positive change in the world. But is this a good execution of that ideal? Absolutely not. Who would agree? No. Next. There are plenty of other examples that prove racial essentialism and collective guilt are being taught to young students. In Cupertino, California, an elementary school required third graders to rank themselves according to the power and privilege associated with their ethnicities. Schools in Buffalo, New York taught students that all white people perpetuate systemic racism and had kindergartners watch a video of dead black children warning them about racist police and state-sanctioned violence. Again, I'm just saying, these are kids. Is this a good way of teaching is the question. And I mean, when I Googled that too, I didn't really find anything. I didn't find this being discussed. So it almost seems like there's no accountability
to how CRT, the crystallized framework, is being translated to these other areas in our lives. And I think a good critique for the right in general would have been that. But anyway, in terms of accuracy, first off, just right in the beginning, they really f***ed up by not demonstrating that they understood the distinction between the framework and the movement. Even Ben Shapiro just got on Bill Maher and demonstrated that he understood. Ben Shapiro's a colleague of this person from PragerU. Like, holler at your boy, Ben. He could have helped you. And it makes me wonder, it was a quick Google search. I did 3.6 seconds, I think, one time, 3.2 the next. I like to Google just to see the speed delta. It took no time at all to find that fact out, that, your definition of CRT with this, like, I'm a store owner, I hate black people. That is not what the framework is about. It took no time at all to debunk that. So I'm just left baffled. That really hurts the accuracy of this otherwise interesting critique. That's the problem. All right, uniqueness. First of all, animated slides. Boom. Really easy to follow these abstract concepts and learn about them through animated slides rather than the people debating on TV, blah, blah, blah. Enough of that stuff. Animated slides rock. Also, I didn't know about how they thought about King in the civil rights movement. That was a shocker to me. So I learned something and I'm grateful for that. But like the other pieces I've seen on CRT, it really focuses on the movement rather than the framework. I think there's plenty of great critique that could have been lobbied against the framework. For instance, the framework focuses on race and not socioeconomic, right? So in the past, it was really clear. Redlining, banks, government got together, boom. Black people, you can't have the loans that were given to white people. Government was in a social kind of time where they're like, we need to build our wealth and our middle class. So white people got all that, blacks were excluded. Today, they do less of the building of the middle class. They kind of do the opposite. So there's less programs. There's no race and policy kind of things. You can point to things like property taxes fund your school district. So if you live in an area, if you grew up in an area with low income, then you're likely to not have as much educational opportunity as someone with a higher income. It has nothing to do with you and everything to do with the wealth your ancestors were able to pass down to you. Now, blacks have been historically disenfranchised by the government. And so we can argue about how fair it is, but ultimately, the critique is just expanded to socioeconomic, and listen, you don't have to come up with how much to focus on which. You just propose the idea and say look, you missed this, and leave it up to the left to come up with a good solution. Just let them do the work, and then you shoot it down. You were the one who brought up the idea first, and that counts more. And so you bring up the idea, maybe they do the work, you shoot that idea. You can put this thing in limbo forever because you brought up the idea first, that it just needs to be expanded, okay? That would have been a good critique. History, same thing. Yes, we want to look back and look at all the history that we might have missed. Tulsa Race Massacre. But you know what? Let's also look back and have a humanitarian view at all the historical figures who've been demonized, vilified. Christopher Columbus, your boy Andrew Jackson. We need to look at them through a true history lens, put them against the men of their times. Let's take away all the bias that has built up our lens of how we view people today. You just throw out that idea, the left will gobble. They'll gobble it up, they'll love it, and then let them do the work and figure it out. But these would have been good critique. That would have been unique. Focusing on the movement, not unique. So power, listen. Love the fear mongering. Had me scared. I'm black and I was scared. Had me going, not today, you ain't gonna take over my country. All these feelings I didn't know I had awoken inside of me with the fear mongering. So I think it was powerful. At the same time, because of the inaccuracy problems with not understanding what CRT, the framework is versus the movement, you're gonna make more people hate you. And so it nullifies the power that you're building almost. Empathy, I think there's no surprise here. wasn't much empathy going around today. I think if they had more empathy, they would have done a better job translating the message. I think there's people on the left and right, again, agree with the message of we shouldn't have a movement that's endorsing tearing up democracy, that one ethnic group is generally bad, and be teaching that to kids. And so what can we do to prevent that from happening? If that is reality, what kind of controls do we need to put on this movement to ensure that's not happening? I think everybody would agree that yes, that's a good point. We should do that. And if you're watching this video so far, I would love for you to tell me what political affiliation you are and if you agree with that statement. That's what I got to say. Let me know what you think of my review. Thank you very much.